You're getting paid for your brain. You're bringing the knowledge to the table. You're telling them what you've seen in the past. You can speak to this equipment or that option, and all that kind of stuff. And if you're watching right now, or if you're watching this and it's recorded, you're already doing the work to be able to bring something to the table that others may not bring.
You got built-in low ambient control too. So if you've got a building that needs to run cooling and it's already cold as all get out outside, you can still run that machine in cooling mode.
Welcome to Talking Comfort Live, a show that reminds us just how cool HVAC can be by discussing today's hot topics in home comfort, from learning to laughing and sharing personal experiences to challenging the leading industry narratives. Our show goes deep inside the world of mini splits, heat pumps, and the inverter technology that brings efficient comfort to our products. And you can help us in our quest to make HVAC cool. We're looking for you to be a part of the show. If you have a question, whether it centers around application, installation, preventative maintenance, future technology, or anything we share on the show, send it our way. We might take it live. Now grab a bucket and take a break. It's time for Talking Comfort Live.
It's April, and it's the 4th month of the year, so welcome to our 4th episode of Talking Comfort Live. I'm James McIntyre, the commercial business leader. Let's go down the line and have everybody introduce themselves. First up, we will go with Greg Bruntz.
Yeah, Greg Bruntz. I am the National Tech Support for Commercial Products for Green.
There we go. And Justin Salisbury.
Hello, I'm Justin Salisbury, Senior Director of Product.
And Jesus Fraga.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jesus Fraga. I'm Commercial VRF Inside Sales.
All right, thanks. Welcome, everybody. So first, I'd like to talk about why do we do Talking Comfort Live. We love this industry. We all did what you used to do, with very few exceptions here at this company. We've all been service techs, and we've been where you are and done what you've done. And the I can tell you that
doesn't mean we did it good.
It doesn't. Yeah, right. Well, what do they say? Those who can't teach, right? Is that what they say? Well, anyway,
something like that.
So, no, I can tell you that the more comfortable and prepared that we felt going out on a service call, the better our day went. Typically, that's what we do here. We try to provide you with knowledge so that you can bring that tool with you. I mean, we get overnight parts. We can't overnight knowledge, right? But we can bring that stuff to you through Talking Comfort Live, our Tech 90s, and our videos. But we would like to hear from you. So using the question mark icon to the right of the screen is the way that you can have your voice heard. It definitely makes our show go so much better if you question and comment. So again, that's the question mark icon to the right of the screen. So today we're going to talk about growing your business without needing to learn new technologies or take on a bunch of risk, and you can do that with Gree Commercial. Then we're going to take a look at some different applications and illustrations Jesus has put together and talk about heat pump and heat recovery and what applications those could be in. We're best to use those. I mean, we still see that every single day. Heat pumps being misapplied or heat recovery being misapplied, or not necessarily misapplied, but one might be better than another in particular applications. Issues that you can solve during the design phase or issues you don't have to solve after the fact. Okay. And we'll talk about avoiding the common trap of limiting our opportunities by making a decision for your customer, by limiting your customer, right? So we're going to talk about that in pretty good detail. And then we're going to get heated at some point. So we'll take a look at some of the YouTube comments and answer some of your questions. And again, the question mark icon to the right of the screen is where you can question or make comments. So let's start talking comfort. So we're going to go right off the bat with talking about our Misnometer. See what our Misnometer has to say. Let's see. You have to grow your sales, or excuse me, you have to grow your business with volume. What do you guys make of that? It's the only way to grow businesses with volume.
I would say that's not necessarily true. You can always grow your business by focusing on more effective sales calls, focusing on larger projects. I know a lot of people think that they need more customers, or even in the heat of summer, you get overwhelmed with a lot of calls, and maybe you don't pay enough attention to teaching every customer that they need, and you're just trying to burn and turn through jobs, right? And you're not making the most effective calls on those projects, or maybe not looking at everything. So there's other ways you can go out and grow your business as opposed to just having a large Rolodex.
Well, I
Right.
think you can also grow your business into, you know, being the expert in listening to the end user or the customer, and what is it their needs are. What do they want out of that HVAC system? Are we just going in, if it's a replacement job, are we just going in and replacing it back with exactly what was there before, which they never liked because, one room was hot, one room was cold, and, listen to what they have to say. And I think you can actually grow your business by being that lead company that's going to come in and say, you know what, we have answers to this. We can make these rooms all be comfortable and even more even temperature throughout the building. And yes, it's going to drive cost up a little bit, but you're selling your service, you're selling your capability to give them what they want. And I believe that the end user or customer is going to be willing to spend a little bit more money to make that building, whether it be a home or a small business or whatever, as long as it's giving them results that they're looking for and having, temperatures in those rooms satisfy the way they want them to be. They want to make them use the rooms got to be useful only if they're comfortable. If they're not comfortable, they're avoiding using those rooms. If you've got let me give an example. Say you got an office building and one side of the building has got a bunch of glass and it's being blasted with heat in the afternoon. Well, what's going to happen if you got one system that cools the entire building, the control's not in that building, that room's going to be hot. What is the business going to do? They're going to avoid using those rooms in hot, sunny days, right?
Yeah.
They're going to use other parts of their building, and they're not getting the full effects of their building. So I think that's just kind of one example there. I think where, if you can grow your business being an expert into listening to the customer's needs and selling a little bit more higher end job to make that building more useful.
Right. I like to think of it too. When you're selecting your decals and stuff for your trucks, everybody seems to put commercial and then residential, right? I mean, they'll do, 95-5 residential versus commercial. I mean, I think that a lot of people want to get into commercial. Where some of the limitations have been on that in the past is, it might end up being a package unit. Nothing wrong there, might end up being like a package unit or something like that. But I mean, we're going to take a look at some of the options that you have with commercial multi-pro. I mean, if you've been thinking about ramping that up, I mean, one of the things that definitely should be considered if you're talking about trying to grow, if you're doing what you're doing right now and then just trying to grow that volume, then that means more trucks, more people, more expense just all the way around, and you can remain small and efficient and highly profitable, or you can get big and be profitable. But right there in the middle, where you're trying to make that next step up, right there in the middle, right there is where you will find when things slow down. You've got all these people, you got all these trucks, you're trying to maintain that. Say you got a rainy season, right? And your new construction stuff starts falling, starts going down. Kind of hard to work out there in the mud and all that and build those houses and all that and keep you going. Well, commercial, you still got swap outs, change outs, maintenance, and all kinds of stuff that still occurs during that time. So, if you've been thinking about making that jump, trying to do that, trying to go to light commercial, well, maybe now's maybe this is that reminder. This now's the time to do that. Um, Look like you had something to say, Greg.
No, that was it. I think you hit
Okay.
it on the head.
I wanted to chime in on that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but I like to look at it as, you really want as a contractor, you really want to be viewed as being the expert in the field, whether it's VRF, and, air conditioning, obviously that does fall with the HVAC, but it's more of like, your normal traditional unitary split system. But if you are an expert like in the VRF side, well, people, you're going to grow that reputation and you get things fixed for the customers. You can easily grow that reputation to where, someone asks a friend that you happen to have done the job for, for recommendation on a contractor. Oh man, turn to him. Him or her. They are the VRF experts. So things like that.
Right. And the fact is, with the commercial multi-pro, you're getting access to something that typically has a lot of hurdles, right? If you're wanting to go do some VRF, who are you going to call? You call your parts house, and then they call somewhere up, and then you got you got to have this and that and all kinds of stuff, right? And they, I mean, it's more complicated right out of the gate. They try to make it as hard as they possibly can, like it's some kind of secretive club or something like that. And I promise you, it's not. The fact is, many of you have already done multi-pro systems, whether 5 tons and down. It's the same technology. It's the exact same wiring. The piping's a bit bigger. That's about it. I mean, there's really not that much of a difference. I mean, all of that is using the same technology. You're bringing the same level of knowledge that you had with you to the job. And in some cases, it might actually be simpler than some of the multi-pro you've laid out. Like the applications that we're going to show. You're talking 1 outdoor unit, 2 indoor units, that kind of thing. I mean, there's many of you that have already done like 10 zones, 8 zones, something like that, which is, I mean, far more complex than some of these quote commercial, multi-pro jobs that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note, as you guys are saying about being the experts and kind of branching out into new products, if you take on this new product, especially VRF, and I think we all kind of know it's hard to find a contractor that's good in that space. But if you're the expert and you do the install and you do it well, the GC, the owner, the engineer will probably recommend you for the next job. So you're going to have steady work. And, on top of that, I think all of us who have been in residential, we have our shoulder seasons where it gets slow. Maybe it's a little cold outside in the fall, but not really. And you only need just a couple of guys to go out and do some preventative maintenances, right? You have to look at the other guys and say, I don't have anything for you. Go home. If I need anything, I'll call you, right? Whereas if you have commercial work's steady all year round. You're going to go into the building. You're going to be, brazing in your piping, putting up your ductwork, putting in the units. I mean, it's steady work. So if you get more into commercial, you're going to have more of a guaranteed income, provided you stay on schedule and bid it properly, right? But I think getting into commercial, it's steady work, it's more year round, and it gives you an opportunity to stand out if you're going into those new technology products like VRF. And I say kind of new technology in air quotes because it's been around since the 80s, but new to us, right? But it helps you stand out. And so you become the expert. And when you're the expert in this stuff and you stand out in your field, then people will tend to seek you out. You don't have to go chasing, all these other different jobs, right? Work will find you.
Well,
right. It's like work.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, like Justin's saying, it's like working smarter, not harder. I mean, you're not having to. I mean, I think the differentiation too. I mean, how it differentiates you from your competition. If you're looking at just volume like that, I mean, there's always going to be somebody cheaper. Right. There's always going to be somebody who's willing to do it for $10 less, per house or whatever. So I mean, a lot of you already do I mean, it seems like most of our contractors, most of our customers, most of the people that we deal with on a daily basis are doing, custom homes, retrofits. They're doing specialized jobs anyway, right? There's a lot of those that are being done. I mean, in my past, that's where I saw where the money was at, which is a lot of the reason why we do this every day. It's not just a hobby. It's not just a way of life. We also like to get paid to do it. What were we going to say, Greg?
Well, no, I was going to say was, Going commercial too, though, also gains you more work in that as far as maintenance goes. Because in the commercial world, whether it's a restaurant, it's a warehouse, heating and air conditioning equipment takes a bigger beating. In other words, there's more dirt, there's more maintenance that needs to be done to these machines. And a lot of that can be indoor work. So when it's pouring down rain, you have an avenue to go to your commercial clients and do some of that indoor maintenance stuff that needs to be done. And then you can do the outdoor maintenance on another day. So it gives you a little bit of a cushion for those rainy days that's keeping you from doing other work. The other thing is commercial businesses are typically open every day of the week, and you can get in there and do some of that maintenance work and stuff because they're open for business, right? So,
right.
You don't have to have, when the homeowner is going to be home so that you can go there and do the maintenance, right? So you can actually get yourself set up a little bit better maintenance and stuff. And they're just going to get dirtier and requires more maintenance. That's good for the contractor for, constant stream of money. And you're going to have a lot easier time getting maintenance contracts with those commercial clients because they want to keep that equipment clean and functional and operational because let's be real. If it's a restaurant, if that air conditioning ain't working in their front dining room, they're not going to have any clients in 95-degree weather sitting in their dining room eating lunch.
Right.
So it's important for them to keep that equipment running. So usually they got the dollars allotted to do that. So there's a lot of gains to doing it.
Right. Absolutely right. Do we have any questions or anything that's come in so far?
There's a few.
Okay.
Let's run through them here.
Just as a reminder, it's the question mark icon to the right of your screen if you've got some things you'd like to put some input on.
So Lance asked, what's the largest system single phase?
Largest single phase system is a 5-ton unit. And I'll just go ahead and do the 3-phase, real quick. We've got 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14-ton single modules, and those can be combined up to 30 tons. And we have those in both 208, 230 3-phase and 460-volt 3-phase. And heat recovery and standard and ultra heating. So we've got a lot of options.
So then I've got another question from Amandeep. I don't know if I'm saying that right, and I apologize if I'm not saying it right. Is this session focused on commercial installations only, or will you also talk about residential? So it is a little bit more geared towards commercial on this one, but a lot of the equipment and I've talked about this in previous trainings, with the multi-pro up to 5-ton, that's single phase equipment. So, and that can be used in small businesses or it can be used in residential applications. So, as a matter of fact, I've actually taken many phone calls here lately. We have one contractor out in California that is putting 3-phase commercial on residences in California. They're big enough homes that they're actually doing heat recovery units on residential homes out there. So I thought that was very interesting. So
not my house.
No, not mine either. So, all right. And then another question came in from Nate. Where can I find recent trainings, tip videos, and how-tos for grease systems?
Well, you can go to greasecomfort. What was that?
So I'll let you answer that one.
Oh, sure. You can go to greasecomfort.com and check out underneath under training and many of those categories there. It can take you to our the illustration showing right now. You can go under distributors and and you can click on training. And then you will have recorded training series on the left-hand side, and then the live virtual trainings are, whenever they're scheduled, it'll show you the schedule on that. You can register for those, and you'll get reminders for those. And go ahead and put it on your calendar and all that. But under the recorded training series, you will have a list of Oh yeah, under browse all videos. Sorry about that. You've got instructional videos. These are also on YouTube on our Agree Comfort channel on YouTube. So yeah, many of these videos that we do, there's really great snippets that come out of these out of the Tech 90s and Talking Comfort Lives, and we produce those so that you can see them on social media accounts. But yeah, a lot of great places to be able to check those things out. So watch them as much as possible, you know. Get all that knowledge. You get paid for your knowledge, right? Well, hopefully you do. You know, at some point, you know, it's a different age for everybody, but at some point your back gets tired or your knees get tired or something like that, and you can get paid for your brain. And it takes a whole heck of a lot less work using your brain than it does using your back, you know? Um, but you know, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you might go with commercial. Um, but I think we pretty well covered most of that. What do you guys think on the reasons why you might go with commercial?
Let's cover one more question that came in real quick.
Okay.
So this is from a Mandeep. I'm a contractor based in Canada. There is a perception that Gree doesn't have enough support from the manufacturer here. Can you please speak to that? So I know there's multiple different distribution channels in Canada, so it depends on the buying group. So it's like anything else. That main distributor that's bringing that equipment in and selling it to the contractors is ones that are responsible for giving you the product support. So I would lean a little harder on the mass distributor that's bringing that equipment in to make sure that they're giving you good quality support, because the support is there. I mean, I feel like we provide exceptional support in the U.S. So best I can answer that.
I'll kind of jump in and speak a little more to that. So within the United States, there's one distributor for the Gree brand. That's us. So we're able to kind of control everything. We have an excellent tech support team, as Greg stated. You know, through our distributors, we kind of require everybody to have their own in-house TSAs so they can go out in the field and address issues, and we help train them, so on and so forth. But of course, our tech support number is out there for everybody, for customers to call in and get that tech support. In Canada, it's a little bit different story because there's multiple companies in Canada distributing Gree. And so, you know, we deal with one distributor up there, TTI, out of Quebec. If you're dealing with them, you know, they have a guy that can go out and help as necessary, or you can also contact our tech support and work through that. However, if you're buying outside of that TTI footprint, you're dealing with some of those other companies out there. Results may vary, unfortunately. So it's just the nature of it that we're not able to kind of control the Canadian market throughout the whole of the country. You know, we're just in a little pocket there. But in the U.S., we kind of have been able to standardize that support and make sure the support that our customers are getting is top notch.
You know, and I'll speak to TTI as well. I think they provide excellent support. There is a lot of a bit of a language barrier because they do sell a lot of it up in the French Quarter up there, and we don't have any French speaking HVAC technicians or TSAs that can answer calls. But we do have TTI has representatives that will reach out to us, and we will assist them to help them resolve the problem when the issues come up. And you know, that's not all the time, but I know them conversations to come on. I've been part of it myself, and we've helped them resolve whatever the issue was. So again, I mean, I'll kind of repeat back what Justin's saying. You know, depends on the distribution outlet you're getting it from. If you're not happy with the support you're getting from that distribution outlet, you need to push harder on that distribution outlet to give you better support.
Right. Yeah, well, that applies for everything that you're buying.
Right.
You know, I mean, so much of the equipment, there's so much that they have in common, right? Especially if you're looking at traditional unitary style systems, they got so much in common between the, you know, different brands. And, I mean, different folks provide different levels of support. And, that's the way it goes.
And I think we pride ourselves in providing excellent tech support and making sure that we got appropriate parts for replacement to get that machine back online as fast as possible if it is a part. And we do. We pride ourselves in not only selling the equipment, but providing that after sales support that is required as a distribution out.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and move into our applications section. So we'd like to talk about the difference between heat pump and heat recovery, and how those two systems can be applied. This is, I guess, a little bit of I wouldn't call it a pet peeve or anything, but I mean, it's something I think about pretty often. As you can probably guess, I eat at a fair amount of restaurants. A little joke there, pretty big guy, and you go into restaurants like, especially just smaller restaurants. I mean, you're either 9 times out of 10, you're freezing in the dining room, or they're back there in the kitchen just sweating, which nobody wants. The people cooking their food, pouring sweat. I don't think anybody wants that. But you see that a lot. There's a lot of applications where you're kind of thinking back of house, front of house, that kind of thing. You got the doors that are open and closing up front, but then of course you've got the heat that's being produced by the kitchen. Or if it's in a different application, like I don't know, like a UPS store or something, you got the people that are doing the work in the back, but then you've got the doors that are open and shutting, all like that all day long. So you do have a pretty wide diversity, between what your load requirements are between the front and the back. So taking a look at the application diagram that we've got, you can see when that's up there on the screen. So in typical applications, what you'll have is a single package unit, which I know that, the business owners themselves might have an opinion on it, but typically it's going to be the person who actually owns, the strip mall or the building or whatever that makes these kinds of decisions. But they get built out like that. So you end up with a kitchen in the back, you end up with dining room in the front, restrooms over on the side, that kind of thing. And what we're showing in this illustration here is that it might be 62 degrees in the dining room and 83 in the back. You've got one unit. What can one unit do, right? I mean, what can it really do? I mean, we see this in residential applications too, right? You see that between upstairs and downstairs, for example, when they try to use one system. One of the ways that they, try to mitigate this is using like a zone damper system, right? To try to provide a little bit less cooling up front, a little more cooling in the back there. But as we've discussed many times before, if it's a 7.5 ton unit and you're just cutting down on airflow, a unit's still running like a 7.5 ton unit. You're just not getting 7.5 tons worth of cooling, right? We talk about that pretty often. What does that do to the power bill? It's just as expensive if it was just running wide open, right? Pretty much, right?
And you still end up, even if you're doing that, you still end up with one space being too hot or too cold and the other space being somewhat comfortable.
Right.
You're never going to satisfy both zones and make both zones happy.
Right. You can meet in the middle and make everybody mad. That's it's a compromise. It makes everybody mad, right? But if we take a look at the next diagram, here's one of the ways that we can do this with commercial multi-pro. And that is we can have one outdoor unit, like an 8-ton, right? A split system. And then we have an air handler in the front of the house, an air handler in the back of the house. And we also have a cassette over there on the side there. It's one way to do it. Many different options, of course. But this gives you the best of both worlds in that I can have more capacity being distributed to that kitchen where it might need it, because of the heat load. Or I can have it more in the front, or more cooling in the front, more heating in the front, whatever I would need at that point. Have two different set points, have two different capacities that I can provide. And let's just say on the shoulder seasons, if it's relatively cool up front, it doesn't really need that much in the way of cooling. You need significant amounts of cooling in the kitchen, still that 8-ton unit is fully variable speed. I'm going to provide, the capacity the capacity that I need. Right. So I provide a little bit of cooling in the dining room and a whole lot of cooling in the kitchen. Just like if it's
So
in the winter,
let's
you might
explain
have
that a
the
little
opposite,
bit,
right?
a little bit deeper. So let's say that's an 8-ton unit out there. Let's say this is a 4-ton air handler at the front of the building, and let's say that that's the only system that needs to be calling. Just for example, I just want to make sure everybody's understanding what James is saying here. That
Right.
outdoor unit, the compressor, fans, and all of that is variable speed, along with that indoor variable speed indoor air handler. So if that's the only zone calling, this thing's not out there running at 8-ton. It's out there running at 4-ton or less, just to be able to maintain this zone. It doesn't mean it's going to run out full out 4-ton. It depends on the temperature demand on that, and it's going to set that demand and how many BTUs we're actually producing off of this, so that we maintain that temperature. Because the one thing with VRF machines that they don't like to do is shut off. So they want to maintain temperature. So if we can maintain it, get it in that 1 degree hover zone and keep the machine running, but maybe this thing's dialing back to 2.5 ton. And it's because that's the only zone calling. Then all of a sudden, this side of the building over here starts getting a little warm, and it comes on. Let's say it's a 2-ton cassette. It might be running at roughly 1 ton, just to kind of help get that under control. Meanwhile, this still back here in the kitchen, we got no calls for anything.
Right. Well, the fact is, all of that's
The idea
done.
is all of it works together, is what I'm trying to point out. The outdoor
Right.
unit, refrigerant flow, and the demand, as far as BTUs goes on all the indoor units, all of this plays together. It's a fully variable system by refrigerant.
Right. Instead of zoning by airflow, you're zoning by refrigerant. Right.
Exactly.
Which is, I mean, again, kind of going back to that question before, is this a commercially focused video? Yeah, but I mean, it's still, these are concepts that are applicable to both residential and commercial.
Yeah,
Right.
we did this residential. You'd have up to a 5-ton outdoor unit out here.
Right.
And then you'd have smaller indoors, obviously,
Right.
but you could still have 3 zones and all different temperature set points. Remember, this is a heat pump, though. You can't have one in heat and one in cool. They all got to be in heat, or they all got to be in cool.
Right.
But you can have different temperature set points and effectively have zoning. And you're zoning by refrigerant, with the demand of the indoor unit and the outdoor unit all playing together.
Well, that's also done by itself. You're not having to go and balance that. I know that you've got a job right now where they're constantly needing some kind of balancing. We say that a
There
lot.
are balancers. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I've seen where people have to go out twice a year. They do it once in the cooling season and they do it once in the heating season. They just keep on doing that. They keep shifting those dampers over and, providing more here and providing less here and that kind of thing. And, this system takes care of that for you, and to your point, Greg, how often are we running at 100% on a particular zone, much less on the whole system?
Right.
Hardly ever. I mean, we're always barely running, even on the hottest days of the year. In order for us just to maintain, we're just barely running. So that means lower energy bills. That means all that.
Well, that's the whole thing about these machines. Once we get the temperature close to where it needs to be, now we're just coasting down the highway in cruise control at 55 miles an hour, where you got the best fuel economy as possible. I mean, that's the best way to relate it to, right?
Right.
You don't get fuel economy doing 80 miles an hour. You get
No.
fuel economy doing 55, right?
Right.
So,
right. Well, I mean, we've got, in most applications, we've got dragsters, and we're talking about fuel economy.
Right.
It's, as soon as they come on, they're coming on as hard as they possibly can, and they run for that quarter mile, and then they're done. And then we're like, why is our gas bill so high? Well, I mean, that's why, you're trying to get there as quickly as possible. But then, you take those regular units and you go, like, let's say the Southeast or near the Great Lakes or something like that. And you talk about humidity removal. Now everybody's talking about wanting to extend that runtime, try to extend that runtime to try to get that humidity out, to try to bring that comfort level up. Right. But you're doing that with equipment that's not really designed to do that. You're trying to extend that run cycle. Well, then when it's super hot outside, it's not quite big enough to meet, to meet the set point, It's just always this game that we're always having to play. And the only way to get there is with variable speed inverter driven equipment. That's the only way to take care of it. And fortunately for us, I mean, on the installation side, that stuff's taken care of for you. You pick the size of your equipment and then it just maintains.
Well, okay, so let's take it one step further. We failed to mention you got built-in low ambient control too. So if you've got a building that needs to run cooling and it's already cold as all get out outside, you can still run that machine in cooling mode.
So I don't need fan cycle switches. I don't need to add, pan heaters. I don't need to add crankcase heaters. I don't need, to add that and hope for the best.
Correct. Already built in.
Already built in, ready to go.
Yep.
One of the other things that I'd like to, just trying to think of those concepts like that. One of the other things that I like to talk about is how often people are redoing these roofs, and when people have roof leaks, where do they occur?
At the package unit. That's
at the package unit. At the curb. It's not our fault. It's not heat and air people's fault. All right, we're not roofers, Where we've seen applications like this is when landlords have decided to put the white membrane roof on, that kind of thing. And we've been able to come in, contractors have been able to come in when they were asked, what kind of solution could they use, and we have swapped it over to split systems so that you do have a hole that effectively just is another plumbing vent, instead of a
right. All you got going through is refrigerant pipe.
Yeah, it's not like a 6 foot by 6 foot hole, and that kind of thing. I mean, that's something to take into account as well. And if you've got room for it, the footprint of these units are pretty slim. So in some applications, we've seen those, they put them out back behind the building and just pipe them in that way. And now you're not craning stuff on the roof anymore.
Right.
There's a lot of things that can save them on some of these applications. But anything else that you guys like to add to this heat pump application?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in this day and age, general contractors coming in, let's say, for instance, like a strip mall, you have several spaces, on a strip mall front. But how many times have we seen where they literally go in and chop them down in half, chop them down in half, chop them down? So now you have, instead of 5 spaces, you have 10. So now what are you going to do? Now you have one package unit serving the area there, but how are you going to split it up? And I believe that's where, zoning with refrigerant pipe, it's a lot easier to move refrigerant pipe versus a duct and try to control, as to how much capacity each zone is receiving. So
yeah, no, that's a great point, Jesus. Like anytime you've walked up to a place and you can see the wall where the windows in front of the wall.
Yep.
Do you think that the heating and air conditioning was designed for that? Yeah, no, absolutely not. Was it designed for that build out? No, they stuck package units up there, and this week it's you've got a Great Clips, and the next week it'll be a restaurant, like a gyro shop or something.
Exactly.
And none of that stuff's been designed around that. But with variable speed, variable capacity units, you've got those options, and you could add indoor units to this system. I mean, there's going to be some limitations on that, but that gives you an option that you don't normally have. I've been in a lot of places like that. Go in there and it's absolutely freezing. They never seem to be able to get it to where it needs to be, and then you find out, yeah, they had it was a restaurant 6 months ago, and now it's a phone store. Right. What kind of heat load do you think you got in a phone store versus a restaurant, right? That's a really great
nothing
point.
More fun than when you go in and try to service one of those units that's a air handler or something, and they put it above a false drywall ceiling with no access to get to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where we showed this in air handlers, but and a cassette. But our options we got so many options. You can do cassettes, you can do wall mounts, you can do air handlers, you can do floor console units. I mean, we've got an endless, whatever fits the design of that building or that layout the best, we have options.
Right.
Yeah, I think Jesus brought up a really good point. If you know engineers or owners and you can work with them and put a little forethought into this, then you can get a heat recovery system with some additional capacity, where you can add some units later on down the road. That way you can kind of make the spaces customizable and then have some tenant billing software in there. You can split it up however you need to. And it's a very easy transition for any company that comes in and says, well, I need this for my specific business. With package units, you can't do that.
Which brings up the very thing. Let's go ahead and bring up the next screen because that's showing heat recovery, which goes right along with what Justin was talking about here.
Right. So what we have here is still just a single outdoor unit, but then we're using what's called a mode box, remote exchange unit. You can call it a BS box, whatever you want to call it. We're pretty familiar with other people's terminology, but we've got a mode box. So instead of wide branches, we're using a mode box, and what this enables you to do is that this front air handler versus the back air handler, they can run in opposite modes. This gives you even more flexibility for that build out, right? If you had a build out that was no longer, going to have a kitchen in it, well, now you got two of them that, you're just kind of future proofing it, right? Front of house, back of house, that kind of thing. But this enables you to run heating in the front, cooling in the back, or vice versa. And going back to the original example, in the winter, you might need heat in the dining room because the door's open and shut and all that. You've got that heat loss that you got out of the front, and you don't really need much in the way of heating in the kitchen. Well, from a concept standpoint, one of the interesting things about that is if I'm running cooling in the kitchen, I've got heat that I'm removing, right? So I've got heat that I'm removing, and I'm adding that back to my refrigerant system, this commercial multi-pro system, and then I can use that heat back at the front of the house, which I don't know how many times you've seen two units serving the same spot. One of them's running heating, one of them is running and cooling, and you're going, they're actually technically they're fighting each other, right? The heat that one's producing is, if you've got any air mixture at all there, they're both fighting each other. And I know that, when you've got time to think about it on a roof, you're going, well, this doesn't make any damn sense at all. It's too bad they can't use some of that heat. Well, with this kind of system, you can use that heat.
Well, and effectively in that scenario you just talked about, James, now you're tipping the iceberg on the efficiency. Your efficiency just went screaming through the roof because you're having to cool off the kitchen to make the cooks happy. And meanwhile, you're taking that free heat you absorbed out of there, dumping it in the living room, keeping your customers happy. The performance on the outdoor machine, the actual compressor runtime, and the speed of that compressor is going to be limited because all we're doing is moving heat from one space that we don't want it and putting it in a space where we do want it. And we're really effectively not having to compress a whole bunch of refrigerant to make all that and produce that heat that we're looking for.
Right. The outdoor unit at that point is also not really doing a whole lot at all.
Right.
The outdoor coil, you still got refrigerant processed through it and all that stuff, but you're not having to reject the heat nearly as much, nor are you having to absorb a whole lot of heat outside. Right. You're taking care of that within that envelope, inside that building envelope. Let me just try to say it one more time on the future proofing of it. Like if you had a kitchen right there in the back or on the right hand side of that diagram, and then 3 weeks later that's no longer a kitchen. Well, now you still got a perfectly functional air conditioning system, very high efficiency and all that. And then 6 months from now, when they throw another kitchen back in there, all of a sudden I'm ready to go. I've already met that qualification. So I mean,
that's one thing we hear in this drawing. It shows a 2-port mode box and only 2 indoor units. But this same job, we could have used a 4-port mode box, have 2 unused ports, and just pick up the 2 we're using. And then, like you say, for further expansion, you got 2 unused ports that we can pick up 2 more indoor units. So,
and I think, I think Justin was going in this direction. One drawing that we don't have from a concept standpoint is taking the same suite and putting it and repeating it right next door. And then you have 2 more units running off of a 4-port mode box or an 8-port mode box, whatever it ends up being. And now you're meeting the demands of front of house, back of house, but for 2 different suites running off of the same outdoor unit. And we have 12 and 14 ton modules. You can do that with, between those 2 suites like that. So you can dramatically reduce the amount of equipment that you're going to have, the amount of crane work that you're going to have, all of that stuff. I mean, you can reduce all of it. And I can say that, we've had some customers that the building owners were able to charge a little bit more of a premium because they, they're not having to spend so much money on utilities they can spend a little bit more on rent. Yeah. So yeah, no, it works out pretty well. It really does. I do have one more application that has come up pretty recently, and it's the same kind of thing, but they do office suites, and they've got some warehouse space adjoining it. And what they did was they just include the utilities up to a certain capacity tonnage, and then they would, if you were going to go over that, depending on the application that you were going to do in that suite, that office warehouse suite, they just add a meter, and then you pay your own power bill. Otherwise, it's just included. They included it in the rent, which I thought was actually pretty brilliant. And of course, they're using equipment like this, not regular units. But
Right.
and then controls. We can do all kinds of like set point limiting and all kinds of things just pretty easily. With these systems. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any questions that came in on this?
There's one more question. So one thing I wanted to say before we, then we'll get to the question.
Okay.
Keep in mind, so the part of the reason why we did this is to make everybody realize commercial VRF systems do not have to be ungodly, huge, complicated systems where you've got 60, 70, 80, 100 indoor units. We wanted to point this out that you can do them, you can make them as complicated as you want them to be, or you can make them as uncomplicated as you want them to be. And James and I think we've talked about this before. I'm a big fan on making it uncomplicated, doing an outdoor unit and up to 4 indoor units. And if you got a building that's going to need 8 indoor units, we can now let's use two smaller outdoor units and do 4 and 4. So that if a machine does go down, you don't lose the whole building, is the concept there. So, and then realistically, there's some offsets and costs there. Yeah, you're buying 2 units instead of 1, but you're buying a smaller unit, which is going to be cheaper than the bigger unit. But you're also probably going to have less piping. So you're going to have less expense in copper and piping and everything like that. So, is it going to be 100% a wash? No, but there's a huge gain in that if the system goes down, you've only lost 4 indoors. You didn't lose 8 indoors or 10 or however many you got tapped into that system, right? So there's definitely some advantages to keeping the system smaller. And, like I said, and it makes the piping a little bit more simpler because you're doing a piping layout only to 4 indoor units or 2 indoor units. You're not having, miles of pipe where you're picking up 80 or 100 indoor units, right? So, and then now your piping is, God forbid you get a leak. It's going to be a lot easier to track a leak on piping going to 4 indoor units than piping going into 100 indoor units, right? So, or however many you're actually tagging into it, right? So,
and I can say historically, with systems like this, like with commercial multi-pro or other style systems like it, typically on commercial jobs, there are going to be a lot of other people involved, that don't really do it for a living like we do, nor like you guys do, right? So you'll end up with a system that, yes, I can go up to 59 indoor units on a 30-ton system. I could do that. And you'll end up with very complex systems that people put together. They're looking at it like, like this diagram. It's lines on a piece of paper. They're not really thinking about the future. They're not thinking about having to work on it, stuff like that. But, the contractors do, because contractors have to work on stuff all the time. We do because, well, we have to support it, but we also had to put the stuff in too. And if you've got somebody that puts together a complex system like that only a rocket scientist can do, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm pretty good at this, but I'm not a rocket scientist. If I'm going to mess up something, it's going to get messed up on a complex system like that. If I mess up something on a simple system, that's a simple fix, right? We like to keep them simple. I think a lot of the problems on these jobs and stuff start from the design phase. Unfortunately for most contractors, where the focus has always been on, well, we just got to get these contractors trained. Well, they just need more training. They just got to do a better job. They just got to do this and all that kind of stuff, right? We can prevent those from the design. And that's where the contractors come in, because the contractors can have a relationship with the general contractor. They can have a relationship with the, the building owner. You know, they can have a say in what is realistic for it, you know, instead of it being left up to somebody else. You know, somebody that honestly, once it's done, they've got nothing else to do with that job. You know, you do, I do.
Right.
So why don't we talk to those people that are incentivized to get it. You know, if you've got a building owner who wants to save on their power bill, this is the kind of system that they want to use. You know, if you're a contractor that wants to reduce the the maintenance headaches, you know, this is the kind of system that you can use. You know? Anyway, that's the point that I wanted to make on that.
So let me get to this question, James.
Yeah,
I think this one's kind of for you anyway. When pursuing commercial projects, you need to ensure that the design engineers feel confident in your system. What resources do you have to educate them? And this was from Earthen. I might have said that wrong, and I apologize. I'm horrible at names, even my own.
That's okay, Greg.
So, pretty good.
Yeah, right. No, we definitely offer a lot in terms of application support. You know, we bring a lot of experience in systems like this with us, so we can assist in that. We are happy to hop on the phone or Zoom or something like that with engineers. We've got much in the way on Greek Comfort and GreekCommercial.com, you know, for submittals and pamphlets and brochures and, you know, all the rest of that. A lot of what's going to make a design engineer comfortable with it is being able to get access to that information. And we've got that information. We've got pretty much everything anybody could ever hope for. The rest of that is the relationship that you have with that design engineer. You know, that's something that I can't really do a whole lot for you on. But to promote confidence, I mean, they're not going to know everything there is to know about the system. They may not have a whole lot of experience with the system. They may even have negative experiences with similar systems in the past. And knowing our equipment better, you having the knowledge level to be able to address some of those concerns, like how would you design that system to take care of that problem that they're describing? Like, I'll give you an example. One very large company out there, they do systems like this, and when they lose an indoor unit, the entire system shuts down. Everything goes out on communication error, right? And if they're using a bid desk and people are putting it together and they don't really know what they're looking at, they're putting together very complex systems, right? Sometimes the best equipment for the job is whatever they have most in stock, right? So when a system like that complex goes down, that's now that design engineer, just like a building owner, GC, or anybody else that would be involved. Now that's their introduction to systems like this. Our system doesn't do that, right? We lose an indoor unit, the system continues to run. We can lose a lot of indoor units and the system continue to run. As a matter of fact, we can lose up to or down to half the capacity of the outdoor unit. So if I had a 10-ton unit, if I lose 5 tons worth of units, I can still run. I can still operate. Everything's still up and running. But knowing that and being able to address that concern with those design engineers is key. You know, you got to, and that's part of the job of establishing that relationship with the design engineer. Then you're somebody who can provide those answers. You know, there's only so much that our marketing materials and stuff like that can do.
Well, I guess the other thing I can comment to that is I've, doing tech support and taking these calls from contractors out in the field. The one thing that's always kind of bugged me, and I'm just going to throw it out there and you guys can take it for what it's worth. So many times I'll talk to a contractor and it's like, okay, why'd you choose this system? Well, I just told them what I wanted and, roughly what I needed, and they set up the system. And they don't know anything about it. Now they're calling trying to install it. They know absolutely nothing about the equipment. And that's why they're calling, because they need help installing the equipment. And I understand that. And we support that 100%. My question is, my thing is, if you are the one that's going to be installing this system and you're the contractor, maybe before you reach out to the distributor, get on our website, become familiar with the equipment. That way you can be smarter in that, hey, I want this system. Can you get me pricing and the quote and everything for this particular system? So you drive the boat. You telling them what you want. Do you want a commercial heat recovery unit? Do you want a commercial heat pump unit? Do you want it to be ultra heated, or do you want it to be standard? Become knowledgeable as to what you need for that job. Read, we got greecomfort.com and we got greecommercial.com. So Greek Commercial is where all our commercial equipment is housed. Go read some of the submittals and the brochures and stuff like that, and make the determination as to what you want. Then contact your distributor about getting pricing and everything for that system, so that way you've got more of a choice in what you're actually buying.
Mm-hmm.
That's my piece of advice to contractors.
Right. And I in my day-to-day, I regularly get on the phone and talk about these systems and kind of walk people through it. I love talking about the applications. I like simplifying those applications before they get designed. A lot of times somebody, puts ink to paper, and that's the design they're going to stick with because that's the best design. If I'm telling you that we need to use less equipment because it's going to be a better design, if basically I'm telling you that I want to make less money, you should probably trust what I'm saying. I want to sell less equipment. I'm doing more work to sell less equipment, which is something that we talk about on the commercial team, a lot actually. Is we do a lot of work to sell less equipment. We want simple systems. We want simple systems that are easier to install. I mean, like we've talked about piping practices, for example. If your nitrogen tank ran out while you were doing one joint, that's one thing. If your nitrogen tank ran out while you're doing 40 joints, that's a whole other thing, right? That's a whole different ball game altogether.
Right.
So a simple mistake like that times 40 is a big, big mistake. That's a big problem, right? But we can solve that kind of stuff, from the beginning. And I think that, anybody out there that has some meetings with some design engineers that want to discuss that, to give them a little bit more comfortability with the company in general, not necessarily just the product, I'm happy to get on that and get on there and discuss. Any of our sales team members are happy to get on there and discuss that with them. So just let us know. Also, we do have email addresses that you can send questions to. If you want to just ask general knowledge questions, you can do that. Even if it comes through tech support, we'll take care of you. Right.
Yep.
Okay. Any more questions on that? On the Q&A?
No, that's all the questions right now.
Okay, so as a reminder, we got to have more of those. The question mark icon to the right of the screen is the perfect place to ask us questions and leave comments. Next, we're going to go with our segment called Stay Heated or Chill Out. And imagine this, folks. Greg is heated again.
No, say it ain't so.
The biggest surprise around. What are you heated about, Greg?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me? I think
okay.
You can
Greg is heated. He was telling me this late last night. Greg is heated because too often he thinks that the contractor is making the decision for the customer. And I would love to know what he means by that.
Well, what I mean by that is they're going in to replace, to bid a replacement job, and they're going in there and telling them exactly what equipment they should buy and giving them a price without talking to that customer, finding out how they like the system. When it worked good, it's broke now, but it didn't always run like that. They're not in there saying, hey, how did you like the system when it worked good? Was the whole space evenly heated and cooled? Did it work the way you wanted it to work? Was there any other problems? They're not, listening to the needs of that customer first, then designing the system around it to make sure that whatever they're bidding is not necessarily the cheapest, but is going to be the system that is going to make that customer the most comfortable, and actually selling themselves as the expert in the field that's going to sell that system that's going to work properly and give them the comfort levels that we're looking at, along with maximum efficiencies, if that's what the customer wants. Customer don't always want maximum efficiency. They may be happy with the middle of the road. maybe that customer wants bare bones because they're putting the house up for sale. I just feel like that there's not enough of that is done.
I got you. So, I mean, I think one good point to make about that is, let's say it was 15 years ago. Somebody sold them a 3-ton and a duct system and all that, and you might go, well, I'm gonna had a 3-ton on it. I'm gonna stick a 3-ton back on it, and they just send it. Just be done. Do you trust?
Okay. So you reminded me of the other part I was heated about.
Yeah.
I didn't actually look to see if the system was sized properly for the home to begin with, or the business to begin with, and it has the adequate ductwork and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I guess at that point, you're letting that other contractor 15 years ago make that decision for you.
They're assuming it was sized properly when it may more than likely probably wasn't.
I have one example I can give you right now, and these are friends of mine. So I got plenty of text messages about it, as you can imagine. Everybody that's listening to this right now has the same problem. But that's exactly what they did. They got somebody to give them a price. They stuck a middle of the road system on that place, same size as it was, same size. This house had been fully remodeled, new windows, new doors, new insulation. Some, I don't know, 3 feet worth of damn insulation in the attic. Yeah, I don't remember.
It's not even the same home anymore.
Not even the same home anymore. Not even close. And they did offer to rip all the ductwork out because it was old sheet metal, and gave them that upgraded stuff. And but went with like a spider duct system and blah blah blah. Well, okay, fine. You're changing the duct system, therefore you're changing the blower curve. You're changing you're changing how all of it works. And now, not only that, it's also oversized. But let me give you one more little issue. It was a 1/2 ton size, and they went up to the next ton up, next whole ton. So not only was it oversized now for this home because it's not even the same home anymore, they went up 1/2 ton size and then went, well, it's a 2-speed system, so no big deal, it'll take care of it. It never would run in the second speed. Didn't have to. It would constantly cycle on its first speed, and it would short cycle on its first speed. And they had a very, very fancy thermostat, and they had, 80% humidity all the time. How do you fix that?
Yep.
I can tell you how you fix it. You take some supply duct, you go outside, just dump it outside, just reduce the overall. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Right? No, you can't fix that. There's no way to fix that. Right? Maybe with a fully variable speed system, it's possible that they wouldn't have high humidity. Right? Possible. But they didn't do the heat load. They didn't do any of that. They took the existing ductwork out, changed it all together, and then and they were just, caught with their pants down at the end of it there,
Well, I can tell you another example that I had dealt with personally. I worked way back years ago. I'd only probably been in business 7 or 8 years, and I was just a service guy working for a company. Well, anyway, we changed out a system for a customer that had an old Carrier split unit that the compressor section was in the basement, and so was the air handler. Outside was nothing but a coil, and it was highly inefficient, but it was a cool thing back in that day, right? And these things ran a super cold coil. Well, we come along and our salesperson, whatever, quoted them a new system. And we put in said new system, and this was back in 12 SEER days, right? So we put a 12 SEER unit in, same tonnage. I got a phone call later that summer, and I didn't get the phone call. I got the dispatch to the call, and I go over there. It was 95% relative humidity in their house with a dehumidifier running 24/7 in the living room. The cabinets were swelled up. They wouldn't even close. And I went back and I talked to my boss, and I was talking to the owner. I'm like, we have to fix this. And the owner said, no, that's not our problem. I'm like, yeah, in the court of law it is. Because we didn't do a proper heat load calculation on that home. And as soon as we get in court, they're going to ask for it, and we can't provide it. So it's going to be judgment for the plaintiff. So before we go to court, why don't we just go ahead and fix this system? And we did. But, it was oversized. the original system was oversized, but them old systems like that, I don't remember the efficiency level. They ran really cold evaporator coils in normal run cycles, so humidity was never an issue with it. But when you go in a 12 SEER and they start running them a little bit warmer evaporator temperatures and stuff like they do today, yeah, we weren't pulling humidity out of that house.
Right. Well, of course, the problem was the higher efficiency system, right? I mean, it wasn't like a design problem or anything, right? It was the fact that it didn't run as cold of a coil.
No, it was because we didn't do our job.
Yeah.
And do heat load calculation. I would say I can't remember exactly because we did some more homework to it all of it. We were good with 1 ton over easily.
Right. So. Which, you know, if you break that down like in a percentage, it makes it even appear worse. You know, when you go over 1 ton over, well, it's 33% too damn big. You know, like it's way too big.
Right.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had a very reasonable homeowner and stuff, and they gave us the time, and we got it fixed.
I will say on the other part, you know, since we do sell a lot of ductless equipment, like this picture behind me here, and also Greg, the like the wall mount thing that comes up a lot. You know, that gets that decision's made for the customer pretty often. You know, when you give out pricing on that and see that there's a substantial difference between ductless units and ducted units, then the customer can make that decision. They're making an informed decision, you know. That's part of the job. It's what you do. Or maybe at your company, it's a whole different set of people that go out and talk, right? You know, the white shirts, right? Isn't that what people call them? Those darn salespeople. You know, they might be out doing their own thing. They want to sell whatever they're selling and that kind of thing. But if you've got any say in that, you know, let the customer decide. I mean, I think that's a good option. But yeah, no, you're playing a dangerous game when you're going with the judgment that was placed years ago. I mean, there's people that do spray foam upgrades in their house. Maybe they don't tell you that. Maybe it was the previous owner that did that. I don't know. You know, now you've completely changed how that house is made. You know, you've completely changed that heat load or heat loss calculation.
Windows alone can make a huge difference depending on when that home was built. You know, the class of windows today compared to the class of windows, you know, years ago, night and day difference.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Well, so you can vote on the stay heated or chilled out. I should have said that before. But you can vote on that by hitting the question mark icon to the right of the screen, and then we will tally that before the end of the episode, and we'll figure out whether or not Greg needs to stay heated. But we can go ahead and vote ourselves if you'd like. I vote that Greg should stay heated on that. I think that's pretty obvious. What about you, Justin?
I absolutely agree. I think Greg should stay heated about that. You definitely need to listen to the homeowner. You know, when you go in to do the bid, I mean, first and foremost, you got to show up to the house and look at it. You know, if a customer calls and says, I want a quote on a 3-ton system, you don't just go, it'll be $8,000 and hang up, right? Show up to the house. Right? And then you show up to it, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Now we got a change order here, right? Show up to the house.
That was good, Justin, but I can see some people doing that.
They do it all the time. And again, it goes back to kind of what I said earlier in the show is, you know, maybe they got five other calls behind them and they don't want to take the time to go out and look it over, right? Maybe they get a little overwhelmed and they're not maximizing profit out of each job. But you need to show up to the house, do your due diligence, do a heat load calculation, check the ductwork, check the electrical, make sure that you can do a proper and code compliant install in that home. If you can't, be upfront with the customer about the challenges, talk to them about it. And then as you're taking the homeowner around and looking at everything, listen to them. They will be your best friend during that time because they'll tell you. It's like, oh yeah, it's been too hot or too cold in this back bedroom. Well, usually a lot of times it's not an indication necessarily of the size of the unit. It's probably a ductwork issue most of the time. Or maybe they got some pets and maybe got some odors inside the house. Or maybe as you're walking around, looking at stuff, you see a bunch of dust particles just floating in the air in front of your eyes. Maybe they're a candidate for indoor air quality. Did you talk to them? Did you even offer air quality components to them? Or a lot of times guys will go in and they're just so timid and they're so afraid to lose the bid. They won't even offer high-end systems. They'll offer, basic 15 SEER system because they're so afraid if they offer something that's more than $10,000 for an install, the homeowner's going to kick them out or is going to go somebody else, right? Whereas maybe the next guy who comes along, they at the very least have a good, better, best sell strategy where they just lay out 3 or 4 different systems and say, here's the different levels. The higher you go, the better the system, but it is more expensive. But here, these are the things that we've talked about, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner. This system up here that's, it's a big ticket item, but this system up here hits all the concerns that you and I talked about as we walk through this house. It's got the IAQ package. It's got, you know, it's a ductless multi-zone system, or it's a GMV system, top of the line. We don't have to worry about the ductwork. We don't have to worry about those hot and cold spots. We don't have to worry about that huge energy bill that you're complaining to me about, right? And then you just set it in front of them on your bid paper, or hopefully maybe you got an iPad with some cool bid software, and then you just let them pick, right? Leave the decision up to them, but don't go in there and tell them what they need. Let them be part of the process.
Right.
Yeah. Don't forget, don't lose the thought that you're supposed to be selling them comfort.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, if you get buy-in on it, I mean, I don't have to tell anybody how to sell. I've not been doing it very long, but if you have buy-in from them, and that's the one thing it's going to set, if you have a conversation, something that actually means something to these people, right, to the customer, they're going to remember. They can go get 50 bids where somebody picks up the phone, tells them $8,000 and hangs up. They can go do that all day. Part of the differentiation that you offer is that right there. I mean, you want to get paid for your labor, or do you want to get paid for your brain? And in that case, you're getting paid for your mind. You're getting paid for your brain. You're bringing the knowledge to the table. You're telling them what you've seen in the past. You can speak to this equipment or that option, and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, if you're watching right now, or if you're watching in this and it's recorded, you're already doing the work to be able to bring something to the table that others may not bring. Those high volume guys, they don't want to spend time on stuff like this. They don't want to talk to them about things. They just want to give them a price and go. I think there's a lot of good points. So yeah, good job, Justin. Yeah, you're right. Greg should stay heated. Maybe he should be even more heated, Maybe he should be more mad. I had to change the title of this, be pissed off or chill out. What about you, Jesus? What about you, Jesus?
No, yeah, I definitely agree. Justin brought up some really great points on the company side of HVAC. You really, there's no such thing as, this is what I sell and this is the best option. There's just no way. We all know that there is better options out there for the customer. And we really need to let them decide, okay, this is the way that I'm going. And, I believe that gives you that reputation that we were talking about earlier. Hey, this guy, he came in, man, he looked at my ductwork, he looked at this, he looked at that, he pointed this out, he pointed that out. Really differentiates you from all these other, air conditioning contractors, where they're just like Justin said, the customer calls, hey, I'm busy right now. I don't know, somewhere around $8,000, hang up. It's like, just something to differentiate you versus all these other contractors out there. So I really think presenting the product and knowing the product and letting the customer decide as to which way they want to go.
Yeah. So some people just want to make their. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think there's too much of this, where they go in, they swap it out, and they get out.
Yep.
And they like that high turnover, but the quality sacrifices. I think if we could get a little bit different concept to spend a little more time on the job, make the job 100% perfect, sell them the most comfort that they're going to get out of that system. You can demand a little bit more money because you're doing a high quality job, and you get out of that rat race of, I got to do 3 installs today, complete change outs, because I'm only making minimal money off each job. Right.
Well, Well, I mean, think about it any other place that you're buying something, especially making a major financial decision. Nobody's making that decision for you. You know, if you go, if you went to a car dealership and you said, "Hey, I like to haul stuff. I got tools to haul. You know, I want to make sure I can get a full piece of plywood in the back of it. You know, all that kind of stuff." And they're like, "No, you're getting a Celica or whatever. You know, this is the best option. All right, that you know, this is how much it costs. Have a nice day. See ya." You know, they're gonna go. You would go somewhere else and buy. That's what you would do. You're gonna go somewhere where they listen to what you're wanting. Maybe you don't want all the bells and whistles. Maybe you do want all the bells and whistles. Whatever it is, and they'll desperately try to find something that you might buy, right? But in effect, if you show up to the job site and you say, "Here, this is what you get," you know, it would be like showing up at a car dealership and they go, "Here, this is the car that you can buy. This is it." You know, you'll go elsewhere, and they do. Um, but let's shift gears real quick. We'll come back to the tablature on the stay heated or chill out. Um, but don't forget the question mark icon to the right of the screen, and we are looking at YouTube comments. So we're going to go take a look at a comment on our YouTube channel at Gree Comfort. And on the video, how inverter-driven compressors work. Okay. From Francis Xavier 5084, we have, "Sir, why IGBT? Why can't we run the compressors without it?" Okay, so this is mostly a comment. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's basically a comment talking about the difference in terminology. So, like a DC, as in a DC driven motor. There are direct current driven motors, but there are also digitally commutated motors. And in our case, we are digitally commutated, and that's where that DC is broken down there. There are many, many technical reasons as to how all of these things are very different. But generally speaking, when we're talking about these types of motors and talking about them being DC motors, we're talking about them being digitally commutated. They are not DC motors. You know,
Yeah. So the terminology in the comment was, since it's still a BLDC, meaning a brushless direct current motor, then why do we need to, why use the IGBTs and all that? It's a different motor. He's not understanding what we're saying there. Okay. These motors that are used in here are essentially AC motors. And the inverter driver is taking single phase power and converting it to DC and then creating its own three-phase sine wave through the IGBTs. By using those switches and gates to be able to control the flow of electricity through the windings, we are actually creating our own three-phase sine wave.
right.
It's not the same kind of motor that he's thinking it is. So,
right. But even with the BLDC motor, if you grab another brand, they'll advertise that they use the BLDC motor on their wall mount, for example. You know, it's got 5 wires on it. It is still a digitally commutated motor. I mean, yes, you're sending DC voltage to that motor, but open up that case and what you've got is an inverter board in there. You've got your IGBTs or whatever, and so you've got a signal wire and all that, but you're sending the DC voltage, you're creating that at the board, and then sending DC voltage where it then creates a 3-phase sine wave and then runs the motor itself.
The variable speed blower motor, same way.
Yeah.
When you take that variable speed motor out of a gas furnace or whatever, and you take that end bell off the end of it, you got them 3 wires going to the motor. That's your 3-phase motor.
Yep.
But in that module is where you're going to find your basically your inverter driver.
Right. Now, the motor itself can be direct current rated, as in it has thicker insulation material on the windings, because DC travels better than AC voltage does. If you've ever touched a doorknob or you've been outside in a storm, it has the tendency to want to jump, so that you're going to have thicker, insulation on the windings, that kind of thing. So they're DC rated, they're DC direct current qualified motors, but we are providing AC voltage and as an AC sine wave. It's a good question. I didn't come up with why they call DC both digitally commutated and direct current. It's not, sorry, I didn't write the rules on that, but that's just, you can blame somebody from a long time ago on that.
I can't speak for James, but I'm not smart enough to understand why they decided to do it that way. I'm just telling you how it works
Yeah, yeah.
in the video.
Right. Yeah. Nobody asked me. Nobody asked any of us. I
No,
don't think.
I guess because we're using, pulse width modulation, right? So it's still technically DC current because you're taking that direct current, but you're pulsing it as such to mimic a three-phase AC sine wave. So if you look at it, if you actually look at it under an oscilloscope, instead of being nice and rounded off like standard AC current, it's actually squared. You see squared waves as it's pulsing. So it's kind of, so again, we're pulsing a sort of like a mock AC current into this equipment, but it's still DC current in such a way. So that's why everything's got to be rated for DC,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of, but yeah, it's the
Yeah.
three-phase AC motors that we're
Yeah.
running
Well.
with a pulse width modulation from on DC current, right?
Right. Well, yeah. In our tech trainings, we do go into detail what that ends up looking like. Like what between just a regular inverter and a true sine wave inverter. Um, if you took an oscope and you zoomed in on what looks like a true sine wave, it's going to have squiggles in it. It goes from being a very, very smooth curve, but the motor doesn't care. I mean, the difference between using like an IGBT and a MOSFET is MOSFET's going to give you more of a sawtooth sine wave, which is what the inverters that are so much cheaper that you buy for like your vehicle or your boat or your camper or something like that, that's why they may work great on certain types of loads. They may not work great on other types of loads. So if you buy a true sine wave inverter, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the technology to be able to drive it just like it was regular AC current. But one of the things that I'll tell you, I mean, just from a technical standpoint, if you go across your U and V or V and W with your meter, you're going to do that with AC voltage. And I don't care if it says 50 volts on it. Your body doesn't care what that sine signal is.
Mm-hmm.
It knows that it gets 310 volts DC in that case. It's a whole lot of pulsing, but it's still 310 volts.
Yep.
I know that from experience. You don't have to learn it. You don't have to touch it. I've had really cool hairstyles before, but yeah, no, it's still, as far as the motor is concerned, you're generating AC sine wave. That's what's generating the magnetic field in the windings and driving that motor, and it's shifting that magnetic field around in those windings to get that motor to turn. So it's like you're having your own power plant as far as that goes. Let's take a look at the stay heated or chill out tabulation. Tabulation? I don't know. I'm trying to use a word that shouldn't be used. We got 100% heated. How about that? How about that? Okay, so the people, not a single chill out, no chill outs at all. See what happens when I'm heated. People are like, "Oh, you should just chill out." But when Greg's heated, everybody's like, "Yeah, you know what? Greg should be mad."
Well, it just goes to show you picked the wrong things to be heated about.
Oh, don't I know it? I get told that at home, and at work. So, yeah, no, I think everybody's in agreement there. That's good. Just keep in mind that the people that aren't voting for chill out are out there right now, not offering their customers anything really besides the price. Okay, well, any other questions have come in, Greg?
Not at the moment, no, sir.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else to add, that's what we have for today. For Talking Comfort Live, we'll see you next month on it's the first Wednesday, which will be, let's see here. Sorry. Guess I don't have that information pulled up right now. First Wednesday is going to be the 7th. Okay. So be sure to sign up for that so that you can get reminders for that. It's always, I like to think that we do a pretty good job in bringing you a lot of information that you need. Maybe even some of it makes you mad, and that's okay too. You can let us know in the comments. let's see. We've got what we got for the Tech 90 coming up here, Greg?
Be April 10th. We will be doing multi-pro startup and commissioning. So I'm doing that one myself. We're going to kind of go over making sure the installation was done properly first, and then we'll get into what you exactly got to do to commission that unit, get it up and running.
You mean it doesn't just tell you that you did the installation wrong?
No.
No.
Well, he will, depending on how bad you messed it up. It could very
How
well give you
bad? That's right.
and stop
Right.
you. So then after that, on April 30th, we will have multi-pro single and three-phase commissioning. So we're going to kind of talk about that down in our Atlanta lab. That's going to be a live broadcast starting at 11 a.m. April 10th was also going to be broadcasting at 11 a.m. And then on May 1st, the day after, multi-pro commercial and single-phase indoor unit troubleshooting. So kind of got the title there as commercial and single-phase, but we kind of share those units anyway. So, you know, as far as troubleshooting those indoor units, it would be the same on either one. So, but yeah, I got some good stuff planned. I'm gonna have Jesus and Robert Arrayes joining me down in Atlanta. I think we'll put on a pretty good show for you and kind of give you guys a little. Where I'm gonna try to bug them up a little bit, and throw some air codes into them, and just have fun with it. I hope you guys enjoy it. So,
No, that'll be good. Bugging them is always fun, especially when you can't get it to break how you want it to. It's always a good time.
Well, I'm gonna have Jesus take your advice and test the voltage with his fingers.
No, please don't do that.
If we got an emergency stop button, I won't let him fry that long.
That's a bad idea. Well, don't worry, that DC voltage is not going to let them fry that long either. But no, that's good.
We ain't doing nothing like that. I mean, all joking aside, that's one thing I will say when it comes to, messing around with this equipment and stuff. That's not the time for games. I take that very seriously. I've had other guests down there in the lab, and I've gotten on them like, hey, wait a minute, we don't run around here. You walk and you watch where you're walking, and be careful of what you're touching. Make sure the power's off. All those things. You just got to be safe. You guys.
Wouldn't we tell you to wait 5 minutes after you turn the power off so the capacitor's discharged? Wait 5 minutes before you start putting your hands in there.
Right. And there's a great test point for that. And we've got exactly where to test that and what voltage it should be at before you start touching stuff.
Right.
But
and I've discussed that many trainings before. You can also kind of watch the inverter board light sometimes, but even though I'll point that out in trainings, I still recommend you get a voltmeter on there. Just make sure, because you don't want to be the source of one of those capacitors discharging. That's not going to feel good.
Right.
And I did a training years ago, and I just happened to be out there, and it wasn't on inverter driven equipment, but I had met the guy, one of the service guys that worked for the shop, and his elbow was all messed up. I mean, it was fixed, but you could tell it'd been damaged, and I didn't have the heart to ask him how that happened, but he shared it with me, and I got the heebie-jeebies real quick. He said, them old units with the big round oval looking run capacitors, He goes, yeah, I was the source of that discharge. And it went in his hand and out his elbow and literally blew out his elbow. So just kind of an FYI, guys, this is not a trade to be overconfident in, not taking proper precautions. Capacitors can hold charge. Just be careful what you're doing. If you're not sure, put a voltmeter on it.
Right.
Because all it takes is that one little split second that you made the wrong move, and you end up with that guy with a completely restructured elbow.
Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah, maybe we should talk about that a bit more, So wear gloves and wear safety glasses. Stop making fun of each other for wearing them. The cool guy ends up with one eye. I'm just throwing that out there. All right. But anyway, all right. I appreciate it, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And be sure to check out Agree Comfort, our YouTube channel, and our agreecomfort.com website for more videos. And agree?
By your side.
By your side.
Right. All right.
Please like or subscribe to our channel at Agree Comfort on YouTube and head over to agreecomfort.com/training for more tips and tricks and all the information you need to help you out in the field. And that was a good show.